"You're a kid playing accountant." That's what my aunt said in my grandmother's dining room, with 23 relatives watching me hold a binder she thought was empty bluff. 6 months later, a neutral fiduciary sat across from her in probate court and read her own reimbursement log back to her, line by line. The missing caregiver payments, the cash withdrawals, the home refinance she arranged under power of attorney, all of it matched the scans my grandmother had asked me to keep. By the end, my aunt's power of attorney was suspended, repayment was ordered, and the family version of her being the responsible eldest died in a room that smelled like old coffee and copier paper. But to understand how she ended up staring at my binder like it had betrayed her, I have to go back to the first statement Grandma slid across the kitchen table. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this always seem to find people who have dealt with one relative who controls the whole room. A quick note. Some identifying details have been changed for privacy, but the emotions at the heart of this are real. And now I want to take you back to my grandmother's kitchen, because that was where the whole thing started, long before anyone said the word court. My grandmother's name was Ruth, but nobody in the family called her that unless they were mad at her or reading something official. To us, she was Grandma Ruthie. She was 81 when this started, 5 feet tall if she had her good slippers on, and stubborn in the way old houses are stubborn. Quiet from the street, settled deep into the ground, harder to move than people expected. She lived in the same little ranch house my grandfather bought in 1978. Pale yellow siding, a narrow carport, a maple tree in the front yard that dropped leaves straight into the gutter every October like it had a personal grudge against whoever owned a ladder. After Grandpa died, everyone kept saying she should sell and move into something easier. My Aunt Diane said it the loudest. She called the house too much for Mom at every birthday, every holiday, every family barbecue. Grandma always answered the same way. "When I can't find the kitchen from the living room, we'll talk." That was Grandma. She didn't yell. She didn't explain herself twice. She just shut a door politely and let you stand outside it. I was 26 then. My name is Theo. I worked the day shift at a print shop and took community college classes at night, slowly grinding through accounting prerequisites because I had convinced myself that if I learned enough spreadsheets, I could eventually make more money than toner dust and paper cuts. I wasn't rich. I wasn't impressive. I drove a 12-year-old Civic with one window that made a dying sound when it rolled down. But I lived 15 minutes from Grandma, and I had the kind of schedule that let me stop by before class or after work. That was how I became her unofficial helper. Not because anyone appointed me, not because I was the favorite, although later Diane loved saying that like it was a crime. It happened because Grandma called me when the printer jammed, and I came over. She called when the pharmacy app locked her out, and I came over. She called when the water bill changed its website and asked for a password with a symbol and a number, and I came over with a sticky note and wrote it down in letters big enough for her to read without her glasses. The first time she asked me to scan her bank statement, she did it like she was asking me to pass the salt. It was a Thursday in February. Rain tapped on the kitchen window. She had a stack of mail next to her mug and one of those letter openers from a funeral home with a faded logo on the handle. I was standing by the counter eating 2 slices of toast she had made, even though I told her I wasn't hungry. "Theo," she said, "you know how to make copies with your phone, right?" "Like pictures?" "Copies. The kind that don't get lost." I wiped crumbs off my fingers. "Yeah, I can scan them." "Why?" She pushed the statement toward me. "Keep an eye on things." That was the whole instruction. Keep an eye on things. I asked if something was wrong. She said no, not exactly. Then she did that thing older people do when they know exactly what they're worried about but don't want to say it out loud because saying it makes it real. "Your grandfather handled the checkbook," she said. I handled the coupons. Now I handle both, and everybody thinks I don't notice numbers because I don't use a computer. I remember laughing a little because Grandma could multiply grocery discounts in her head faster than I could open a calculator. But she didn't smile. She tapped the statement with one knuckle. Just scan it for me. Bills too. Every month. Put dates on them. If I need them, I want them where nobody can spill coffee on them. So I did. I downloaded a scanner app, spread each page on the kitchen table, and took pictures while Grandma sat beside me with her reading glasses low on her nose. Electric bill, gas bill, bank statement, Medicare notices, pharmacy receipts, the property tax bill. She had me scan all of it. Then I made a folder on an old laptop she barely used and a backup folder in my own cloud account, because the print shop had taught me one thing. If a document mattered, one copy was just a prayer. At the time, it felt like a small chore. 10 minutes a month. 15 if the app acted up. I had no idea those scans would become the spine of a court petition. I had no idea they would be the only reason anyone believed me later. I was just a grandson making digital copies because my grandmother asked me to. Diane entered the story, at least this part of it, as the responsible eldest. She was my mother's older sister, 56, sharp hair, sharper voice, the kind of woman who arrived at family gatherings carrying a covered dish and a list of everyone who had disappointed her. She worked as an office manager for a dental practice and treated that like it made her fluent in every legal and medical issue known to man. She had 2 adult kids, a husband named Paul, who mostly communicated in sighs, and a talent for making any room organize itself around her mood. When Grandpa died, Diane took charge of the funeral flowers, the obituary, the thank you cards, and every conversation with the bank. My mother was softer and easier to overwhelm. My Uncle Mark lived 2 hours away and ran a hardware store that ate his weekends. So when Grandma signed a durable power of attorney naming Diane, nobody questioned it much. Diane had always wanted the clipboard. Grandma needed somebody on paper. It seemed practical. The power of attorney sat in a folder at Diane's house. She mentioned it often enough that it became part of the family weather. As Mom's POA, I need to know who is driving her to appointments. As Mom's POA, I should be copied on that bill. As Mom's POA, I can't have random people confusing her. Random people somehow meant me. At first, Diane tolerated me because I was useful. She liked that I shoveled the walkway. She liked that I fixed the television input when Grandma pressed the wrong button. She liked that I was the one who got called at 8:30 p.m. because the smoke alarm battery chirped. What she didn't like was Grandma trusting me with paper. I learned that in April, 2 months after the first scan. Grandma and I were at the kitchen table going through the mail. Her hands were worse in the mornings, so I opened envelopes and read the small print. Diane came in through the side door without knocking, carrying a reusable grocery bag and wearing sunglasses on top of her head even though it was cloudy. "What are we doing?" she asked. Not, "Hello." Not, "How are you, Mom? What are we doing?" Grandma looked up. "Mail." Diane's eyes moved to my phone. "Why is he taking pictures of your bank stuff?" I said. "Grandma asked me to scan things for her." Diane put the bag down slowly. It had bananas, yogurt, and a pack of chicken thighs inside. She arranged the handles before she answered like she needed her props in place. "Mom, that's private financial information." Grandma said. "I know what it is." "Theo doesn't need access to that." "Theo needs access to whatever I hand him." Diane's mouth tightened. She turned to me. "You're not an accountant." I almost said, "Not yet," which would have been stupid. Instead, I said, "I'm just scanning them." "Exactly," she said. "You're playing office with documents you don't understand." Grandma took her glasses off. "Diane." That one word was enough to make Diane change tone, but not direction. She smiled at Grandma like Grandma was a difficult customer. "I'm just protecting you, Mom. There are a lot of scams. People get taken advantage of by family all the time." Grandma looked at her for a long second. "That's why I asked him to keep copies." The kitchen went quiet. Not dramatic quiet. Real quiet. The refrigerator motor clicked on, and outside a car rolled over wet pavement. Diane laughed once. "Well, okay, if that's what makes you feel better." Then she took the mail stack, slid out the bank statement, and flipped through it before putting it back. She did it casually, but I noticed her thumb pause on the second page. I didn't know why yet. For the next few months, the routine held. I stopped by on the first Saturday after the statement arrived. Grandma made coffee. I scanned. She asked me to read certain line items out loud. Most were normal. Pension deposit, Social Security deposit, Medicare supplement, pharmacy, electric, grocery store. The same small pattern of a retired woman's life. Then there were the caregiver reimbursements. The first one I noticed was in May. It was labeled D. Miller reimbursement for $1,275. Miller was Diane's married name. I didn't jump to anything. Care costs money. Diane did buy groceries sometimes. She did take Grandma to appointments when I couldn't. There were receipts, probably. I read it out loud because Grandma had asked me to read anything over $500. D. Miller reimbursement $1,275. Grandma frowned. "For what?" "It doesn't say." She reached for the statement. "When was that?" "April 8th. I had my foot doctor on the 9th. Your aunt drove me. We stopped at the diner. She paid because I forgot my purse. That was maybe $20. I shrugged. Maybe there were other things. Grandma didn't answer. She took a yellow legal pad from the drawer, wrote April 8th, Diane 1275, and underlined it. That was the second planted thing, though I didn't recognize it. Grandma didn't just ask me to scan. She started making a log in her own handwriting. Dates, amounts, questions. She wrote slow because arthritis had bent 2 fingers on her right hand, but she wrote everything. By June, the reimbursements were showing up twice a month. $950, $1,425, $1,100. Then came ATM withdrawals. $600 from the branch near Diane's office, $800 from a machine inside a grocery store Grandma never visited. Another $600 on a day Grandma was home with a respiratory infection, and I knew that because I had brought soup and watched 3 episodes of an old detective show with her. I didn't accuse anyone. That matters. I want to be clear about that because later Diane acted like I had burst into the house waving papers and calling her a thief. I didn't. I was scared to even say what I was thinking. Money in families is dangerous. Money around old people is even worse. You can smell the accusation before anyone speaks it, and once it is in the room, every old resentment wakes up. Who visited more? Who sacrificed more? Who got help with a down payment in 1999? Who paid for the funeral lunch? All of it comes crawling out. So I started carefully. One Saturday, after Grandma wrote down another reimbursement, I said, "Do you want me to ask Aunt Diane what these are for?" Grandma stared at the legal pad. "No." "Okay. Not yet." That was Grandma too. She didn't move until she was ready, but I could tell it bothered her. She started checking her purse before Diane came over. She asked me if the bank could print old statements. She asked if I knew how to make a spreadsheet. That last one made me smile, and she caught it. "Don't you smirk at me," she said. "I know spreadsheets exist. I just don't want to touch them." So I made one. Date, description, amount, Notes, scan file name. It was ugly at first. I used colors because I thought colors helped. Grandma told me it looked like a circus and made me remove them. We settled on plain rows. By the end of July, the questionable items totaled $7,850. That number sat in my head all week. I would be at work trimming flyers on the guillotine cutter, and the number would come back. $7,850. I would sit in class listening to my instructor talk about accruals, and there it was. $7,850. Not an inheritance number, not a big dramatic movie number. But it was Grandma's money. It was hearing aids. It was property tax. It was the furnace that groaned every winter. It was months of help if she needed it. And none of it seemed to be reaching her. The first confrontation happened in August, in the church basement after my cousin Leah's baby shower. There were folding tables everywhere, plastic tablecloths, paper plates with cake frosting smeared on them. Grandma was sitting near the wall with a cup of tea. Diane was by the kitchen window counting leftover favors like she was closing a business. I waited until most people had left. I did that on purpose. I didn't want to embarrass her. I walked over and said quietly, "Aunt Diane, can I ask you about something on Grandma's statements?" She didn't look up. "What statements?" "The monthly bank statements. Grandma asked me to help scan them." Now she looked up. "Still doing that?" "Yes." "Of course you are." I took a breath. "There are reimbursements to you, some ATM withdrawals too. Grandma didn't recognize a few, so I was wondering if you had receipts or notes." Her face changed in a way I still remember. Not guilt exactly. More like annoyance that a drawer she thought was locked had opened by itself. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No, I'm asking what they're for." "For your grandmother, obviously." "Okay, what kind of expenses?" She folded the last favor bag and set it down. "Theo, adult caregiving is not scanning papers at a kitchen table. There are things I handle that you don't see." "I understand that. That's why I'm asking." She stepped closer. Her voice stayed low, but it had that edge she used when she wanted the other person to feel smaller. "You're a kid playing accountant. You don't understand power of attorney. You don't understand how much I do. You show up for coffee and suddenly think you're running an audit?" There it was. The line. "You're a kid playing accountant." I felt my face get hot. I was 26, not 12. But she had a way of dragging people back to whatever age made them easiest to dismiss. I looked past her at Grandma, who was pretending not to watch from across the basement. I said, "Grandma asked me to keep an eye on things." Diane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mom asks a lot of things when she's anxious. Don't feed it." That was the first time she hinted Grandma's mind was the issue. It wouldn't be the last. I went home that night and didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if I had handled it wrong. Maybe there were expenses I didn't know about. Maybe Diane was paying out of pocket and reimbursing herself badly. Maybe I was seeing patterns because Grandma had made me look for them. I wanted there to be a normal explanation so badly that I spent the next morning trying to build one. I pulled up the spreadsheet and added a column for possible legitimate expenses. Gas, groceries, co-pays, house supplies, lawn care, respite care. I tried to make the numbers fit. They didn't. You can explain a few $100s. You can even explain a messy month after a hospital visit. But you cannot explain almost $8,000 with diner lunches and chicken thighs. Then September came, and Diane made the mistake that turned suspicion into a plan. Grandma had a cardiology appointment on a Wednesday morning. I had work, so Diane took her. That afternoon, a reimbursement hit the account for $1,650. The memo said, "Caregiver transport and supplies." I stopped by Grandma's after work. She was in her recliner with a blanket over her knees, annoyed because the cardiologist had told her to cut back on salt. "Did Aunt Diane pick up supplies today?" I asked. "She picked up a lecture," Grandma said. "From the doctor. Same as me." "No pharmacy? No equipment?" "We stopped at Walgreens. I bought mints." She used my card. "How much were the mints?" Grandma looked at me like I was stupid. "Theo, they were mints." I showed her the line item. She took the phone from me, held it close, and read it twice. The room felt smaller after that. "Print it," she said. "Grandma, print that one and the others." "What are you going to do?" She handed the phone back. "I'm going to ask my daughter why my mints cost $1,600. She did ask, not right away, and not with me there. She called Diane the next morning. I know because Grandma called me after, and her voice was thinner than usual. "She said it was a mistake," Grandma said. "Okay. Did she say what kind?" "She said she put the wrong card in the wrong app." "For $1,600? Then she said I was confused." I closed my eyes. I was in the print shop break room, standing next to a vending machine that hummed too loud. "What exactly did she say?" Grandma inhaled through her nose. She said, "Mom, this is why I handle things." That sentence did something to me. Not because it was loud, because it was practiced. It was the kind of sentence you use when you want someone to doubt their own eyes. 2 days later, Diane called me. I was in my car outside class, eating a granola bar for dinner. Her name lit up on my phone, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I thought, no, don't be a coward. Answer. "Hi, Aunt Diane. You need to stop agitating your grandmother." No hello. Again. "I'm not agitating her. She called me crying yesterday." Grandma had not been crying. Grandma's anger sounded like a door closing softly. Diane continued. "You are putting ideas in her head. You don't have the maturity to understand what you're doing." She asked about a reimbursement. That's reasonable. You do not get to decide what is reasonable. I have legal authority here. You don't. Legal authority doesn't mean nobody can ask questions. There was a pause. Then she said, very quietly, "Careful. It wasn't a movie threat. It was worse because it was family. It carried Thanksgiving tables and birthday texts, and who gets invited to what. It meant, I can make everyone tired of you." I said, "Are you telling me not to visit Grandma?" "I'm telling you that if your visits upset her, I will do what I need to do. Grandma wants me there. Mom doesn't always know what she wants anymore." That was the second wrong surfacing, though it wasn't money. It was narrative. Diane wasn't just taking control of accounts. She was preparing to take control of the story. If Grandma questioned her, Grandma was confused. If I questioned her, I was manipulative. If anyone noticed money moving, caregiving was complicated and we were too immature to understand. What Diane didn't know was that by then Grandma and I had 6 months of dated scans, her handwritten notes, and a spreadsheet that was starting to look less like concern and more like evidence. Still, I tried the normal way one more time. I called my mother. Her name is Elaine, and she is the middle child in every possible way. Middle in age, middle in conflict, middle in volume. She had spent her whole life smoothing things over after Diane made them sharp. I said, "Mom, I think something is wrong with Grandma's money." She went quiet. "What do you mean wrong?" I explained the reimbursements, the ATM withdrawals, the cardiology day. I expected her to be alarmed. Instead, she sounded tired. "Theo, your aunt does a lot." "I know." "Do you?" "Because she has been saying you're making Mom anxious." There it was. Diane had already started. Grandma asked me to scan statements months ago. This isn't coming from me. But you can be intense about things. That stung because it was half true. I do get intense. I like receipts. I like numbers lining up. I like being able to prove a thing happened. In most of my family, that made me useful until it made me inconvenient. Mom, I said, if there are receipts, this is easy. Diane can show them. I don't want to accuse my sister of stealing from our mother. Neither do I. Then don't. She didn't hang up angry. That would have been easier. She hung up sad, and somehow that made me feel worse. For a while, I wondered if I should stop. Not stop visiting Grandma, but stop looking. Stop scanning. Stop being the person with the folder. There is a strange loneliness that comes with noticing something before everyone else is ready to see it. You start to feel like the problem is you. If you would just put the paper down, maybe everyone could go back to casseroles and birthday cards. Then Diane tried to bar me from visits. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in October. I had texted Grandma that I was coming by with soup because her arthritis was bad in damp weather. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji she had learned to use accidentally and then embraced as her signature. I pulled into the driveway at 2:10 and saw Diane's SUV in the carport. When I knocked, Diane opened the side door only halfway. Now isn't a good time. I looked past her. Grandma expecting me? She's resting. From inside, Grandma called, "Theo?" Diane's jaw tightened. I said, "I can hear her." I said now isn't a good time. Grandma called again, louder. "Let him in, Diane." Diane didn't move for 2 full seconds. Then she opened the door and stepped back with a smile so fake it belonged on a store mannequin. "Of course. Come upset her if you need to." Grandma was in the living room, sitting upright, not resting. Her cheeks were pink with anger. On the coffee table in front of her were 3 envelopes I recognized from the bank. "Your aunt says you're not to bring up money anymore," Grandma said. Diane laughed. "Mom, that's not what I said. You said Theo confuses me. I said he overwhelms you. I am overwhelmed by people telling me what I heard." I almost smiled. Diane saw it and pointed at me. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. He enjoys this." "I don't," I said. "Then why are you always here with documents?" "Because she asks me to be." Diane turned to Grandma. "Mom, you have to understand how this looks. A young man with financial problems spending hours with an elderly woman and her bank records." That one landed like a slap. Grandma's voice went cold. "Young man. That's my grandson. I know who he is. Do you?" Diane grabbed her purse from the armchair. "I'm not doing this. If you want to let him isolate you, that's your choice. But when this becomes a problem, don't say I didn't warn you." She left through the side door hard enough to rattle the little stained glass sun catcher in the window. I stood there with the soup container in my hands, feeling 12 years old again. Grandma patted the couch. "Sit." I sat. She said, "Did you hear what she called you?" "A young man?" "A person with financial problems." "I mean, my car does sound like a blender full of coins." She didn't laugh. "That is how it starts," she said. "First, she makes you look greedy. Then when you show the numbers, nobody listens because they already decided why you're showing them." I looked at her. "You think that's what she's doing?" Grandma reached for the top envelope. Her hand shook, but not from confusion. "I raised her," she said. "I know when she's building a fence." That night, she gave me permission to call the bank and ask what information they could provide with her on the line. She sat beside me and verified every security question herself. The customer service representative was polite in the careful way people are when they know a family member is listening. She confirmed that the reimbursements had been initiated through online bill pay from Grandma's checking account. She confirmed that the ATM withdrawals used a debit card ending in numbers Grandma didn't recognize. "Can you tell when that card was issued?" Grandma asked. The representative said she could not give much detail over the phone, but she could mail a card history to the address on file. Grandma looked at me and nodded. "Mail it," she said. The card history arrived 8 days later. A debit card had been issued the previous November to an authorized user. Diane. That didn't prove theft by itself. Power of attorney can allow access. Authorized cards can be legitimate. But the withdrawals lined up with Diane's office area, Diane's grocery store, Diane's side of town. Grandma circled each one in pencil. Then she said something I still think about. "I don't mind needing help," she said. "I mind someone charging me for help I didn't get." The neighbor confirmed the next piece. Her name was Mrs. Alvarez, and she had lived next door to Grandma since before I was born. She was 78, wore gardening gloves in every season, and knew more about the street than the postal service. She brought Grandma soup when I couldn't. Grandma fed her cat when she visited her daughter. They had a friendship built on borrowed sugar, shared weather complaints, and pretending not to worry about each other. In late October, I was taking Grandma's trash cans to the curb when Mrs. Alvarez called me over. "Theo, is your aunt still paying that home care lady?" I stopped with one hand on the bin. "What home care lady?" "Mrs. Alvarez pulled off one glove. "The one she told me was coming Tuesdays and Fridays to help your grandmother shower and do laundry." I felt the back of my neck go tight. "When did she tell you that?" "Spring. She said if I saw someone new going in, not to worry. But I never saw anyone. I thought maybe the schedule changed." "Did Grandma ever have a home care lady?" Mrs. Alvarez looked toward the house. "Not unless she was invisible." I asked if she would be willing to write down what she remembered. She gave me a look like I had asked if she believed in chairs. "Of course. Your grandmother is not a wallet with slippers." That sentence became my private anchor. Your grandmother is not a wallet with slippers. When I told Grandma, she went very still. "Home care," she said. "Did Diane ever talk to you about hiring someone?" "She said I might need it eventually." I said eventually wasn't today. "There are reimbursements labeled caregiver." Grandma nodded slowly. "Then we need more than statements." That was when she asked me to bring the accordion file from the hall closet. It was blue, cracked at the corners, and packed so full the elastic had given up years ago. Inside were tax returns, old insurance papers, the deed to the house, Grandpa's death certificate, and a copy of the power of attorney. I had never read a POA before. I expected it to be dense and impossible. It was dense, but not impossible. Diane had authority to pay bills, manage accounts, deal with property, and act in Grandma's interest. That phrase appeared again and again. In her interest. For her benefit. Not for Diane's convenience. Not for family politics. Not for whatever Diane decided she deserved. I scanned the POA, too. By November, Diane had moved from warnings to pressure. She called my mother more often. She told Uncle Mark that I was making Grandma paranoid. She told my cousins I was trying to get written into the will. She told Grandma's pastor that family dynamics were becoming difficult and that she might need support setting boundaries. I know that because the pastor called Grandma and asked if she felt safe. Grandma put him on speaker. "Pastor Jim," she said, "I feel safest when people stop asking me if I know my own grandson." He cleared his throat. "Ruth, I only wanted to check." "Then check this. If Diane calls you again about my boundaries, tell her my boundary is that she can stop discussing me like I'm already dead." I stared at the table because if I looked at Grandma, I was going to laugh, and it was not a laughing moment. But the pressure worked on everyone else. Thanksgiving was awful. We had it at Diane's house, as usual, because she had the biggest dining room and the strongest need to control the seating chart. Grandma sat at the head of the table in Grandpa's old chair. Diane made a point of helping her with every little thing: napkin, water glass, plate, cranberry sauce. She performed care like a stage play, and everyone watched because that was what Diane wanted. When I asked Grandma if she wanted more potatoes, Diane answered for her. "She's fine," Grandma said. "I have a mouth." A couple of people laughed nervously. Diane smiled and squeezed Grandma's shoulder too hard. After dinner, I heard my cousin Leah in the hallway telling her husband, "Theo's been weird about Grandma's money. Mom says he's obsessed." I stood in the bathroom with the door half closed, feeling my stomach drop. Leah and I had been close as kids. She used to sleep over at our house and eat cereal straight from the box. Now she sounded like she was describing a stranger. Her husband said, "Is there money?" Leah lowered her voice. "The house mostly. Mom thinks he's trying to position himself." Position himself? Like Grandma was a parking space. I didn't confront Leah. I washed my hands and stayed in the bathroom until the hallway cleared. Then I went back to the living room and sat beside Grandma. She looked at me once and knew. "Let them talk," she said under her breath. "Easy for you to say." "No," she said. "It isn't." The next week, Grandma fell. It happened in the kitchen around 6 a.m. She reached for the kettle, her slipper caught on the mat, and she went down hard on her left side. Mrs. Alvarez heard the phone because Grandma managed to call her first. I got there 10 minutes after the ambulance. Diane arrived at the hospital wearing makeup and fury. "Why wasn't anyone with her?" she demanded. I was standing near the nurse's station, still in my work hoodie, hands shaking from the drive. It was 6 in the morning. "Exactly. She shouldn't be alone." A nurse asked us to lower our voices. Diane turned the fury into tears so fast I almost admired the mechanics of it. Grandma had a bruised hip and a small fracture in her wrist. No surgery. But she needed help at home for a while. Real help. Not invisible home care. The hospital social worker gave us a list of agencies. Grandma picked one with an office near her church. Diane insisted she would coordinate. I said, "Maybe we should have the bills go directly to Grandma's address and scan them." Diane looked at me like I had spit on the floor. "This is not the time." Grandma from the hospital bed said, "It is exactly the time." The social worker glanced between us and wrote something down. That note mattered later. For 2 weeks, a real aide named Patrice came weekday mornings. Patrice was cheerful, practical, and immune to Diane's tone. She helped Grandma shower, changed sheets, made breakfast, and wrote her hours on agency forms. I scanned the invoices. They were normal. Clear dates, clear hours, clear rate, $32 an hour. Painful, but real. And during those same 2 weeks, Diane reimbursed herself another $2,400 for caregiver services. That was the moment my restraint broke. Not loudly. I didn't call Diane. I didn't send a family text. I sat in my car outside Grandma's house with the statement on my lap, and I felt something inside me go very quiet. There is a difference between being angry and being done. Angry wants a fight. Done wants a folder. I went home and reorganized everything. Every scan got a file name starting with the date. 2026-02-bank-statement. 2026-05-electric. 2026-09-cardiology-reimbursement. I made subfolders: bank statements, medical, care invoices, POA, grandma notes, neighbor statement. I exported the spreadsheet to PDF each time I updated it so nobody could say I changed it later. I photographed Grandma's legal pad pages in good light and saved those too. I also started a visit log. Date, time, who was there, what happened. It felt paranoid until it didn't. October 23rd, Diane blocked door. Grandma stated she wanted visit. November 4th, Diane called, said visits upset Grandma. November 17th, Pastor Jim called after Diane contact. December 3rd, social worker present, Grandma requested direct billing. This is the part where people in the comments sometimes say, "Why didn't you just call the police?" And I get it. From the outside, it looks obvious. Money missing, elderly person, power of attorney. Call someone. But real life is not a neat button. Banks have privacy rules. Police hear family money dispute and slow down unless you have a clean packet. Adult protective services is important, but they need specifics. Probate court needs a petition. Lawyers cost money. And while you're figuring that out, you still have to sit across from these people at Christmas and pretend the ham isn't being carved by someone who may be draining your grandmother's account. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I made the packet cleaner. In December, the second wrong surfaced. It came from a property tax notice. Grandma's county had an online portal where you could see assessment history, tax bills, and recorded documents if you knew where to click. I was looking up the property tax due date because Grandma wanted to confirm Diane had paid it. The portal had a tab labeled Recorded Documents. I clicked it expecting to see the old deed and maybe Grandpa's death affidavit. There was a deed of trust recorded in July. I stared at the screen for a long time. Deed of trust. Lender name. Principal amount, $68,000. At first I thought it was old. Some refinancing from years ago, but the date was July 14th. That was 4 months earlier. The borrower was Grandma. The signature line had Diane's name, followed by attorney in fact. I printed it at work the next morning before my shift. I know I wasn't supposed to use the shop printer for personal documents, but I fed my own paper into tray 2 and stood there while the pages came out warm. 15 pages. Adjustable rate rider. Closing disclosure. Cash to borrower. Payoff of prior small home equity line. New money disbursed. Cash to borrower. $52,384.17. I felt sick. Grandma had never mentioned refinancing her house. She hated debt. Grandpa had paid the mortgage off early by working overtime at the machine shop and eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for 15 years. The house being paid off was family scripture. Diane herself had bragged about it when she wanted Grandma to sell. I drove to Grandma's after work with the papers in a folder. My hands felt clumsy when I put them on the kitchen table. "Do you know anything about a refinance?" I asked. Grandma's face did not change right away. She looked at the top page. Then she reached for her glasses. "Read it." I read the borrower line, the July date, the amount, the phrase, attorney in fact. She listened without interrupting. When I got to the cash disbursement, she closed her eyes. "I signed no refinance," she said. "Diane signed under the POA. For what purpose?" "It doesn't say beyond the loan documents." "Where did the money go?" I didn't answer, because we both knew that was the question. That night, I added a new tab to the spreadsheet called Refinance. I traced the $52,384.17 deposit into Grandma's checking account. It appeared 2 days after closing. Then, over the next 6 weeks, it disappeared. $10,000 cashier's check, $8,500 transfer, $6,200 payment to a credit card company that was not Grandma's, $4,000 cash withdrawal, $3,100 to a contractor Grandma didn't recognize. Smaller payments after that until the balance looked ordinary again. What Diane didn't know was that the refinance turned her mess into something different. The reimbursements could be argued as sloppy caregiving. The ATM withdrawals could be explained badly. But a refinance on an elderly woman's paid-off home under power of attorney, followed by money leaving in chunks, was not a misunderstanding. It was a lever big enough for a court to grab. I called Uncle Mark before I called anyone else. Mark was the oldest son, though Diane was older than him by 11 months, and never let him forget it. He lived in a town called Fairview, ran a hardware store, and had spent most of the last few years believing Diane's version because believing it was easier than driving 2 hours into a fight. He wasn't cruel. He was avoidant. In our family, avoidant people got recruited by whoever spoke first. He answered on the fourth ring. "Theo, everything okay?" "No, can I send you something?" He sighed. "If this is about your aunt, I'm not getting in the middle. I need you to look at a recorded refinance on Grandma's house." Silence. "What refinance?" "Exactly." I emailed him the documents, the spreadsheet summary, and 3 bank statement excerpts. Then I waited. 10 minutes, 20, 40. I was pacing my apartment so hard the downstairs neighbor thumped the ceiling. Mark called back after 53 minutes. His voice was different. "Did Mom know?" "She says no." Diane signed as POA. "Yes." "Where's the money?" "That's what I'm trying to find out." He swore under his breath. I had heard Uncle Mark swear maybe twice in my life, both times involving plumbing. "Send me everything," he said. I did. "No, I mean everything. Start from the beginning." That was the first crack in Diane's wall. Mark drove down the next Sunday. Diane didn't know. He came to Grandma's house in jeans and his store jacket. Carrying a box of donuts like that made the visit casual. Grandma hugged him and then hit his arm because he hadn't visited since Labor Day. We spent 4 hours at the kitchen table. I showed him the scans in order, not conclusions. Documents. February, normal. March, normal. April, first reimbursement. May, 2 more. July, refinance. August, ATM withdrawals. September, cardiology reimbursement. November, real care invoices overlapping with Diane's caregiver charges. Mark didn't say much at first. He had a contractor's way of looking at problems. Quiet, squinting, measuring the wall before cutting anything. At one point, he picked up Grandma's handwritten note from April 8th. "This your writing, Mom?" "Unless Theo learned cursive to frame your sister." He smiled despite himself. Then he got to the refinance papers. He read the cash disbursement line 3 times. "Diane told me Mom was thinking about a reverse mortgage," he said. Grandma slammed her palm on the table. Not hard, but hard enough to make the spoons jump. I told her if she said reverse mortgage again, I would reverse her out my front door. Mark leaned back and rubbed his face. "She said it was for repairs." "What repairs?" I asked. He looked around the kitchen. Same old cabinets, same chipped tile by the back door, same humming refrigerator. "I don't know." Mrs. Alvarez came over halfway through because Grandma called her. She brought her written statement in a folder with a floral sticker on it. It said Diane had told her a home care worker would be coming twice a week starting in May, but Mrs. Alvarez, who was home most days and whose kitchen window faced Grandma's driveway, never saw any such worker before the agency aide Patrice after the fall. She also wrote that she personally helped Grandma with trash, mail, and laundry on several dates Diane later listed as caregiver days. Mark read that too. Then he put the paper down and looked at me. "What do we do?" It was the first time an adult in the family said we. I had already done enough late-night research to know the rough paths. Adult Protective Services, Bank Fraud Department, a lawyer who handled elder financial abuse and probate, petition for accounting, petition to review or suspend power of attorney, possible conservatorship or guardianship, depending on the state terms and Grandma's capacity. I didn't know which path was right, and I didn't want to pretend I did. So I said, "We talked to a lawyer, with Grandma. Not about Grandma. With her." Grandma nodded. "Good. I enjoy being alive in conversations about me." Finding the lawyer took another week. We called 3 offices, One wanted a retainer so high I laughed out loud after hanging up, then felt bad because none of this was funny. One didn't handle contested family matters. The third was a small elder law firm above a pharmacy, run by a woman named Paula Hensley, who sounded tired in the way competent people often sound tired. Her assistant asked what the issue was. I gave the short version: power of attorney, unexplained reimbursements, refinance, elderly principal denies knowledge, family conflict. There was a pause. Can you bring documents? I looked at the binder on my desk. Yes. The appointment was on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. Mark closed his store for half a day. I took unpaid time from work. Grandma wore her blue coat and the pearl earrings Grandpa had given her on their 30th anniversary. Diane was not invited. Paula Hensley's office had beige carpet, 2 ficus trees that had seen better decades, and framed certificates arranged with no concern for symmetry. She was in her 60s, silver hair, no nonsense. She greeted Grandma first. Not Mark, not me. Grandma. Mrs. Coleman, what do you want help with? Grandma sat straighter. I want to know where my money went. I want my daughter to stop using papers I signed as permission to treat me like a child, and I want my house left alone, unless I say otherwise. Paula nodded once. That's clear. Then she asked questions. Was Grandma under a diagnosis affecting capacity? No. Had any doctor declared her unable to manage affairs? No. Did she understand the power of attorney? Yes. Did she want Diane to continue serving? No. Did she want to revoke it? Grandma looked at me, then Mark, then back at Paula. Can I? Paula said, if you have capacity, yes, we can prepare a revocation, but revoking it going forward doesn't automatically solve what happened before. For that, we look at accounting and possible recovery. That was the first time I heard the phrase court-ordered accounting from someone who knew what it meant. Paula explained it plainly. A person acting under power of attorney has fiduciary duties. They may be required to keep records and account for transactions. If there are signs of misuse, an interested person, and certainly the principal herself, can petition the court. The court can order the agent to produce records, suspend authority, appoint a neutral fiduciary, refer issues for further action, and order repayment or surcharge if funds were misused. She did not promise fireworks. She did not say, "We'll destroy your aunt." She said the process could be slow, expensive, and emotionally ugly. She said Diane would likely claim all expenses were for Grandma's benefit. She said family members often choose denial until a judge makes denial inconvenient. Then she opened the binder. For the first time in months, I watched someone outside the family look at the documents without already having a role to protect. Paula read the spreadsheet. She checked the scans against it. She held Grandma's handwritten log next to the bank lines. She asked about each reimbursement, each withdrawal, each transfer after the refinance. After 20 minutes, she looked at Grandma. This is better organized than many accountings I receive from appointed fiduciaries. Grandma pointed at me. The kid did that. I felt my throat tighten. Paula looked at me over her glasses. Keep being the kid. That line carried me for weeks. We left with assignments. Grandma would sign a revocation of Diane's power of attorney and a new limited POA naming Mark for immediate bill-paying help, with checks and balances. Mark would open a separate folder for current bills. I would keep compiling the historical packet. Paula would draft a demand letter to Diane requesting records, receipts, and an explanation of transactions. If Diane refused or gave nonsense, we would file. The revocation happened 2 days later. Paula sent it by certified mail to Diane, the bank, the mortgage lender, and relevant institutions. Diane received her copy on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, she called a family meeting. Not with Grandma, Not with Paula. With the family. The text went out in a group chat I was not originally included in. My cousin Leah added me after my mother asked why my name wasn't there. Diane's message was long and polished. Family, we need to meet Sunday at 4, regarding Mom's care and concerning behavior from Theo. I have tried to handle this privately, but he has escalated matters in a way that may harm Mom financially and emotionally. Please attend if you care about protecting her. If you care. That was Diane's gift. She could tuck a knife into a greeting card. Grandma wanted to go. Paula advised against turning it into a circus, but Grandma insisted. She said, "If my children are meeting about me, I will be in the room." Paula told us to bring documents, but not to argue every point. She said to listen. Let Diane make representations. Write them down. Do not threaten. Do not yell. Do not produce originals. Copies only. I barely slept Saturday night. I kept thinking about being outnumbered. Diane had been talking for months. I had documents, but documents don't hug people at Christmas. Documents don't remind your cousin that your aunt babysat her kids during a hard year. Documents don't compete easily with a person who has already told everyone what to feel. The meeting was at Diane's house, in the same dining room where Thanksgiving had curdled. The table had been cleared except for a yellow legal pad in front of Diane and a box of tissues placed strategically near Grandma's chair. Leah was there with her husband. My mother was there, pale and anxious. Uncle Mark stood by the window instead of sitting. 2 cousins came. Paul hovered near the kitchen entrance looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Diane opened with a sigh. Thank you all for coming. This is not easy. That was how I knew she had rehearsed. Grandma said, Then don't perform. Speak. Diane's smile flickered. Mom, please. This is exactly the hostility I'm concerned about. She turned to the room and started. Theo had inserted himself into Grandma's finances. Theo had been scanning private documents. Theo had convinced Grandma that normal caregiving reimbursements were suspicious. Theo had pressured Grandma into revoking a power of attorney that had allowed Diane to keep the bills paid for years. Theo was unemployed half the time, which was not true. Theo had debt, which was true if student loans counted, and apparently, they did when Diane needed them to. Theo was isolating Grandma from the daughter who had done the real work. I sat there with my binder under my hand and felt the room tilt away from me. Leah wouldn't look at me. My cousin Ryan looked embarrassed for me. My mother kept twisting a napkin. Paul stared at the floor. Diane's voice filled every gap. Then she said, And now he's trying to drag Mom into court. At her age. Can you imagine? Grandma said, I can imagine many things at my age. Diane ignored her. This is about money. Let's be honest. Theo thinks if he makes me look bad, he can get control. He thinks because Mom calls him for little chores, he's entitled to a say. But caregiving is not a hobby. It's not a spreadsheet. It is hard, expensive, thankless work. My Uncle Mark finally spoke. Then showing receipts should be easy. Diane turned to him. Excuse me? Mark's voice was calm. If it's all reimbursements, show receipts. I don't appreciate being cross-examined in my own home. You called the meeting. That was the first tiny shift. Not enough to save me, but enough to make Diane sharpen. She pointed at me. He has poisoned you, too. I opened the binder. My hands were sweating and the plastic sleeves stuck slightly to my fingers. Aunt Diane, I said. Grandma asked for copies. We have the statements. We have her notes. We have the refinance documents. We have the care agency invoices. We have a neighbor statement about services billed before any aid came. Nobody is asking anyone to believe me because I say so. Look at the records. I slid copies toward the center of the table. Diane did not touch them. Leah did. She picked up the refinance closing disclosure and frowned. What is this? Diane snapped. A document Theo doesn't understand. It's a loan on Grandma's house, I said. The room changed. You could feel it. Money from a checking account was one thing. A loan on the house was different. The house had emotional gravity. It was Christmas mornings and Grandpa's tomato plants and the pencil marks on the pantry door where everyone's height had been measured. My mother whispered, "Diane?" Diane lifted both hands. It was for Mom's benefit. The house needed work. She needed liquidity. I handled it because that's what the POA was for. Grandma looked at her daughter. What work? Mom, you don't remember every conversation. Grandma's face went flat. Try me. Diane reached for the tissue box. She did not take a tissue. She just moved it closer, like a shield. This is exactly what I'm talking about. He has made you suspicious of me. I said, where did the $52,384 go? Diane's head snapped toward me. Do not speak to me like that. It's a question. You're a kid playing accountant. She said it again. Same line, same contempt. But this time, the table had documents on it. For 1 second, I thought that would be the moment. I thought everyone would see it. They didn't. Not fully. Ryan muttered, "This is messed up." Leah said, "Maybe we should let Mom explain." Diane seized that. "Thank you, I am trying, but I won't be attacked by someone who benefits if I am removed." Benefits how? Mark asked. Access, influence, eventually the will. Don't be naive. That was when the room turned on me. Not everyone, not loudly, but enough. Leah asked if Grandma had changed her will. My mother asked me if I had talked to Grandma about inheritance. Ryan asked why I had copies stored in my own account. Paul said maybe all documents should go to a neutral person, which sounded reasonable until Diane nodded too quickly. Someone said court would drain Grandma's money. Someone else said Diane had sacrificed for years and deserved grace. I tried to answer one question, then another. The more I talked, the worse I sounded. Defensive. Young. Intense. Exactly the role Diane had built for me. Finally, Diane stood. Until we sort this out, I do not want Theo alone with Mom. Kiyu, Grandma said, you do not get to decide that. Diane looked at the others, not at Grandma. For her safety. Nobody spoke. That silence was the loneliest moment of the whole thing. Not court, not the lawyer's office, that dining room. I looked at people who had known me since I was born, and I saw them weighing whether I was the danger because Diane had made the alternative too ugly to face. Grandma pushed her chair back. The legs scraped the floor. Theo, she said, take me home. Diane moved toward her. Mom, please don't make a scene. Grandma looked around the table. I am the scene, apparently. Mark stepped forward and helped her with her coat. I gathered the binder. Diane said my name once. Sharp. But I didn't turn around. If I had, I might have said something that felt good for 5 seconds and hurt the case for months. In the car, Grandma stared out the windshield. It was already dark, and Diane's porch light turned the glass into a mirror. I could see her face reflected in it. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For making it worse. She turned to me slowly. You didn't make the wound. You touched it. People blame the hand because the wound hurts. I had to blink hard. Then she said, tomorrow we file. And we did. Paula filed a petition for accounting and review of Diane's actions under the power of attorney. She attached enough exhibits to show cause without dumping the whole archive at once: bank summaries, selected statements, the refinance documents. Grandma's declaration stating she did not authorize the refinance, did not receive the benefit of the questioned reimbursements, and wanted Diane's authority suspended. Mark signed a supporting declaration. Mrs. Alvarez signed one too. Patrice from the care agency provided invoices and a short statement confirming the agency start date after Grandma's fall. Paula also notified Adult Protective Services and the bank's Elder Abuse Department. The mortgage lender received a notice disputing the authority and benefit of the refinance. None of this moved like television. There were no dramatic raids, no handcuffs, no judge banging a gavel 10 minutes after filing. There were forms, certified mail receipts, phone calls, waiting, and a level of stress that made ordinary life feel like acting. I went to work. I went to class. I scanned Grandma's new bills. I answered texts from relatives who suddenly wanted summaries but didn't want documents. Diane sent long messages to the family group chat about betrayal and spiritual warfare, which was new for her because she usually only got religious when she needed forgiveness without accountability. She also sent me one private text. "You have no idea what you've started." I screenshotted it and saved it to the folder. That became my reflex. Call log. Screenshot. Save. Certified mail receipt. Save. Bank letter. Save. Every time Diane tried to intimidate me, she added paper to the pile. She still thought of documentation as something I did after the fact. She didn't understand that by then, documentation was the room we were both standing in. The court set a preliminary hearing for January 18th. Before that, Diane's attorney filed a response denying wrongdoing. It said the reimbursements were for caregiving, supplies, transportation, home maintenance, and compensation for time spent managing Grandma's affairs. It said the refinance was necessary to preserve Grandma's standard of living and maintain the home. It said Grandma was being influenced by Theo, an unemployed grandson with financial motives. Unemployed again. I read that line in Paula's office and laughed once because if I didn't laugh, I was going to throw up. Paula looked at me. "Are you employed?" "Yes." "Bring pay stubs." So I did. Pay stubs. Class schedule, lease, student loan statement. Not because my finances should have mattered, but because Diane had made me part of her defense. If she could make the court see me as a predator, the documents might look like weapons instead of records. Grandma hated that. "They are putting you on trial because they don't want to answer a subtraction problem," she said. Paula said, "That's often how these cases work. We stay boring. Boring wins." Boring became our strategy. No dramatic accusations, no family posts, no angry emails. Paula's demand for accounting was specific. Produce receipts, invoices, mileage logs, calendars, contracts, bank records showing use of reimbursed funds, documentation for the refinance purpose, and proof of repairs or expenses paid from loan proceeds. If Diane claimed compensation for caregiving, produce written agreement or basis for rate, dates, hours, and services. Diane produced a spreadsheet. I will never forget that spreadsheet. It arrived as a PDF, printed from Excel, with wide columns and vague categories. Care support, household supplies, transportation, administrative time. Emotional labor. Emotional labor had a dollar amount, $9,600. When Paula read that line, she took off her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "I'm not saying family caregiving has no value," she said, "but courts generally prefer records over vibes." Grandma said, "Can you put that in the filing?" In more formal language, Diane's spreadsheet listed dates but not receipts. It claimed 5 hours of caregiving on days Diane was at the dental office, according to public social media posts, and, later, payroll records subpoenaed by the fiduciary. It claimed supply runs that matched charges to stores near Diane's house, but Grandma's house never received the items. It claimed payment to a contractor for bathroom safety upgrades, but no bathroom upgrades existed. The old towel bar was still loose. I had tightened it myself with a screwdriver from Grandma's junk drawer, and the refinance explanation was worse. Diane claimed the loan proceeds were used for anticipated care needs, home repairs, debt consolidation for Grandma, and reimbursement of prior advances Diane had made from personal funds. But she provided no promissory notes, no receipts, no itemized prior advances, and no evidence Grandma had debt requiring consolidation beyond a small medical bill already paid by insurance. What she did provide was outrage. At the preliminary hearing, Diane arrived in a navy blazer and pearls, looking like she expected the court to thank her for coming. Her attorney was a man named Mr. Feld, who spoke in smooth paragraphs. Grandma sat between Paula and Mark. I sat behind them with the binder on my lap. My mother came too, sitting on the opposite side of the aisle, halfway between camps, because that was where she lived emotionally. The judge was not theatrical. He was a gray-haired man with reading glasses and a voice that made everyone lean in. He had clearly read the filings. Mr. Feld argued that this was a family disagreement being inflated by a disgruntled grandson. He said Diane had served faithfully for years. He said caregiving arrangements are often informal. He said Ruth was elderly, vulnerable, and being pressured. Grandma leaned toward Paula and whispered too loudly, "I am elderly, not decorative." Paula put a hand over her mouth, but I saw her shoulders move once. When it was Paula's turn, she did not perform. She walked through the timeline: power of attorney, questioned reimbursements, debit card withdrawals, fall, real agency care, refinance, dissipation of proceeds, revocation, demand for records, insufficient accounting. She emphasized that Grandma herself was petitioning, not me, not Mark, Grandma. The judge asked Diane's attorney one question that changed the air. "Where are the receipts?" Mr. Feld said they were being gathered. The judge looked at the file. The demand letter was sent 6 weeks ago. Families don't always maintain records with commercial precision, Your Honor. The judge nodded slightly. Agents under a power of attorney are not relieved of record-keeping because Thanksgiving is complicated. I wrote that down even though the court reporter had it. Some sentences deserve backup. The judge ordered Diane to produce a full accounting within 30 days. He temporarily suspended her authority pending review, acknowledged Grandma's revocation, restricted further use of the loan proceeds, and appointed a neutral fiduciary named Ms. Larkin to review records and report back. Mark would handle routine bills under Grandma's new authorization, with monthly statements copied to Paula. Diane was ordered not to contact financial institutions on Grandma's behalf. It wasn't the final payoff. Not yet. But it was the first time an institution said, out loud, "Stop." Diane did not look at me when we left the courtroom. Leah, who had come with her, did. Her face was pale. In the hallway, Diane whispered something to her attorney. Then she walked past us and said, "I hope you're proud." Grandma answered, "Not yet." I almost dropped the binder. The next 30 days were the longest of my life. Ms. Larkin was thorough in a way that made my spreadsheet look like a grocery list. She was a professional fiduciary with cropped hair, square glasses, and the energy of someone who had seen every family excuse twice. She requested bank records directly. She requested mortgage closing files. She requested Diane's personal bank records to the extent they received Grandma's funds. She requested dental office payroll records for dates Diane claimed caregiving hours. She interviewed Grandma, Mark, me, Mrs. Alvarez, Patrice, the pastor, and eventually Diane. Her interview with me lasted 2 hours. We sat at Grandma's kitchen table because that was where the archive lived. Ms. Larkin had a laptop, a scanner wand, and a paper checklist. She asked how the scans started. I told her. She asked whether Grandma directed me to keep them. I said yes. She asked if I had ever asked Grandma to change her will. I said no. She asked if I expected to inherit. I said honestly that I had no idea and didn't want to discuss it with Grandma. Then she asked, Why did you keep going after the family meeting? I looked at Grandma's legal pad on the table, the one with April 8th, Diane, 1275, underlined. Because Grandma asked me to keep an eye on things, I said, and once I saw them, I couldn't unsee them. Ms. Larkin typed that. She also interviewed Grandma alone. I waited outside on the porch in a coat, listening to traffic and trying not to imagine every possible thing that could go wrong. After 40 minutes, Ms. Larkin opened the door and called me back in. Grandma looked tired but satisfied. She asked better questions than my children, she said. Ms. Larkin did not smile, but one corner of her mouth considered it. Diane delayed. Of course she did. She produced partial records, then corrected records, then said some receipts were lost, then said some were digital and she couldn't access the email, then said Paul handled certain payments. Paul, when contacted, said he didn't know anything about Grandma's accounts and would prefer to be left out of it. That sentence may have been the most honest thing anyone in Diane's house said that year, but institutions have a patience family members do not. Ms. Larkin didn't get tired because Diane cried. She didn't back off because Diane said she was hurt. She asked again. Records. Receipts. Dates. Amounts. Purpose. The bank records started coming in mid-February. They showed that the $10,000 cashier's check from the refinance proceeds had been deposited into Diane and Paul's joint account. The $8,500 transfer went to a credit card in Diane's name. The $6,200 payment went to another card. Several cash withdrawals matched deposits into Diane's account within 48 hours. A $3,100 contractor payment went to a company owned by Diane's brother-in-law on Paul's side. That company had done work on Diane's kitchen, not Grandma's house. The dental office records showed Diane had worked full days on at least 9 dates she claimed 6 or more hours of hands-on care. The grocery store charges she called household supplies included wine, party trays, cosmetics, and a gift card. I wish I were making that up. A gift card. Ms. Larkin traced what she could. Not every dollar. Cash is cash. Some money disappeared into places that would have required more litigation to chase, but the pattern was clear enough. Her preliminary report landed like a brick. Questioned transactions, $41,870 in reimbursements, withdrawals, and transfers lacking adequate support. Refinance proceeds not shown to benefit Ruth, $49,612.34. Duplicate caregiver claims during agency care period, $2,400. Unsupported claimed emotional labor, not compensable absent agreement or court approval. Recommendation: continue suspension, require full repayment or surcharge subject to final hearing. Consider referral for investigation, appoint neutral fiduciary for financial management if Ruth desired support, and require court approval for any further encumbrance of the home. Grandma read the report at the kitchen table. She got to emotional labor and looked up. I should charge Diane emotional storage, she said. I've been holding hers since 1973. Mark laughed so hard he had to stand up. My mother did not laugh. She had finally come over to see the documents herself. Not summaries, not Diane's version. Documents. She sat across from Grandma, reading page after page, and cried quietly without making anyone comfort her. I didn't want it to be true, she said. Grandma reached across the table and touched her hand. None of us did. That was the thing Diane never understood. I had not wanted to catch her. Grandma had not wanted to be right. Mark had not wanted to believe his sister used a power of attorney like a personal ATM. Every document that helped us also hurt. That is the ugly part of family justice. The proof that saves you is also proof of what you lost. The final hearing was scheduled for March 9th. By then, Diane's support had thinned. Leah stopped posting vague quotes about loyalty. Ryan texted me asking if the refinance document was real. My mother started driving Grandma to appointments once a week, partly to help, and partly because guilt needs somewhere to go. Mark came every Sunday with donuts and fixed things around the house that did not need fixing. The towel bar became the most secure object in the county. Diane, though, did not soften. She changed tactics. Her attorney filed objections to Ms. Larkin's report. They argued that the fiduciary misunderstood family caregiving, that Grandma had benefited indirectly from Diane remaining available, that the refinance proceeds were part of a broader care plan, and that records were incomplete because Theo had interfered. Again, me. Always me. Diane's defense had become less about explaining the money and more about making the person who organized the records look contaminated. Paula prepared us for that. They may put you on the stand, she told me. Answer only what is asked. Don't argue. Don't volunteer speeches. If you don't know, say you don't know. If a document answers, point to the document. I nodded. Grandma said, "Can I answer speeches?" No. Shame. The night before the hearing, I went to Grandma's house to drop off printed copies. She was in the kitchen making tea she would forget to drink. The binder sat on the table between us. It had grown to 4 binders by then, but the original black one was still the heart of it. The first scans, the legal pad copies, the timeline. Grandma ran her hand over the cover. Your grandfather kept receipts in a cigar box, she said. Drove me mad. Every screw, every filter, every gallon of paint. I used to tell him the house would drown in paper. Maybe he was onto something. Don't tell him that if you see him before I do. We sat quietly. Then she said, Tomorrow they will make this sound like I am a poor old woman who can't understand her own life. Do not let that make you angry. I'm already angry. Then be angry in your shoes, not your mouth. That was probably the best legal advice anyone gave me. The courtroom on March 9th was colder than the first time. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Maybe it was just me. Diane sat at the front with Mr. Feld, wearing a cream sweater and a small cross necklace I had never seen before. Leah sat behind her, but not as close as before. My mother sat behind Grandma this time. Mark sat next to me, Ms. Larkin was there with her own binder. Hers was gray, tabbed, and terrifying. The judge began by stating the purpose. Review of accounting, objections, authority under power of attorney, potential remedies. Mr. Feld spoke first. He said Diane loved her mother. He said caregiving had consumed years of her life. He said informal families do not operate like corporations. He said Theo had created an adversarial environment. He said Ruth's current position reflected undue influence. The judge let him finish. Then he asked, Is your client prepared to explain the refinance proceeds? Mr. Feld said yes. Diane took the stand. I had seen my aunt command rooms my whole life. Church basements, dining rooms, hospital hallways. But a courtroom is different. It does not run on who sighs loudest. It runs on questions, answers, and paper. Mr. Feld guided her gently. She talked about taking Grandma to appointments, buying groceries, managing bills, losing sleep, being criticized by relatives who didn't help. Some of it was true. That made it harder. Diane had done things. She had driven Grandma places. She had bought groceries. She had managed some bills. The betrayal wasn't that she had never helped. It was that she had wrapped real help around false charges until the truth was harder to separate. Then Paula cross-examined. She started with the line Diane loved. Mrs. Miller, you understood that acting under power of attorney required you to act in your mother's best interest, correct? Of course. And to keep records? To the extent reasonable. You were an office manager for a dental practice? Yes. So you are familiar with invoices, receipts, and payment records? Diane hesitated. In a business context. Your mother's money was not your personal money, correct? I never said it was. Please answer yes or no. Correct. Paula took her through April 8th, the $1,275 reimbursement. No receipt. Grandma's note questioning it. Diane said it covered multiple errands. Paula asked which ones. Diane couldn't recall. May 12th, $950. Supplies. Which supplies? She couldn't recall. September cardiology day, $1,650. Transport and supplies. Diane said it included accumulated expenses. Paula asked, including mints from Walgreens? A few people shifted behind me. Diane's face tightened. That was a small part of a larger pattern of care. Where is the larger pattern documented? I was caring for my mother, not building a legal case. Paula let the sentence sit. Then she moved to the caregiver claims during the agency period. Patrice's invoices showed weekday morning care. Diane claimed overlapping hours. Diane said she visited later. Dental office records showed she was at work. Diane said records can be wrong. Paula showed a social media post from the dental practice that day, with Diane standing beside a patient appreciation display at 3 p.m. Diane said she may have gone after. Your reimbursement says 6 hours, Paula said. It was not exact. But the amount was exact. Diane looked at the judge, then back at Paula. The room had gone very quiet. Even the papers sounded loud. Then came the refinance. Paula displayed the closing disclosure, principal amount, cash to borrower, Diane's signature as attorney in fact. She asked if Diane had discussed the refinance with Grandma. Yes. Grandma whispered, no. But Paula touched her arm. When? Paula asked. Several times. Dates? I don't remember exact dates. Any notes? No. Any emails? My mother doesn't email. Any witnesses? It was between us. Convenient, Grandma muttered. The judge looked over his glasses. Grandma pressed her lips together. Paula asked what repairs the refinance funded. Diane named bathroom safety upgrades, kitchen repairs, and general accessibility work. Paula showed photos taken by Ms. Larkin the week before. Bathroom unchanged, kitchen unchanged, no ramp, no widened doorway. No new rail except the grab bar Mark installed after the fall for $38. The old towel bar, now very secure, gleamed in one picture like an accidental witness. Who performed the work? Paula asked. Diane named the contractor connected to Paul's family. Isn't it true that company performed work on your kitchen in August? Diane blinked. No. Paula handed her an invoice obtained by Ms. Larkin. Same contractor. Diane's address. Cabinet refacing. Deposit $3,100. Paid from Grandma's refinance proceeds. That was the first visible crack. Not a confession. Not tears. Just Diane's eyes moving too quickly across the page, looking for a door that wasn't there. Mr. Feld objected to characterization. The judge overruled enough of it that the point remained. Paula moved through the credit card payments. $8,500, $6,200. Diane said she had put Grandma's expenses on her personal cards. Paula asked for statements showing Grandma's expenses. Diane had not produced them. Ms. Larkin's traced records showed charges for Diane's household, travel deposits, dental office uniforms, and payments unrelated to Grandma. Then Ms. Larkin testified. If Paula built the road, Ms. Larkin drove the truck down it. She was neutral. That mattered. She did not love Grandma. She did not resent Diane. She did not owe me anything. She explained her methodology in plain language. Documents requested, documents received, transactions traced, unsupported amounts categorized, potentially legitimate expenses separated from unsupported ones. She even credited Diane for certain grocery trips and prescription pickups where receipts or corroborating records existed. That made the rest stronger. She was not there to punish Diane for being disliked. She was there to account. Then the judge asked Ms. Larkin to walk through the reimbursement log. This was the moment from the hook. The moment Diane finally understood what the binder had been doing the whole time. Ms. Larkin opened her gray binder to tab 4. The courtroom lights made the plastic tabs shine. Diane sat at counsel table with her hands folded, but her thumbs moved against each other. I noticed because I was watching everything too closely. Ms. Larkin said, "I prepared a chronological comparison using the bank statements, Mrs. Coleman's handwritten notes, the scanned documents maintained by Mr. Coleman, and the records produced by Mrs. Miller." "Mr. Coleman, that was me. Nobody called me a kid in that sentence." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Ms. Larkin began. April 8th. Reimbursement to Diane Miller, $1,275. Bank statement page 2. Mrs. Coleman's handwritten note asks, quote, "For what?" End quote. No receipt produced. Mrs. Miller states accumulated errands but provides no dates, mileage, or receipts. Diane looked down. May 3rd. ATM withdrawal, $600. Card ending 4419. Grocery store. ATM near Mrs. Miller's workplace. Mrs. Coleman states she did not possess that card. No corresponding purchase for Mrs. Coleman's benefit identified. Diane's attorney whispered to her. She shook her head slightly. May 18th. Reimbursement, $1,425. Memo. Caregiver support. Neighbor statement indicates no caregiver observed during relevant week. Mrs. Coleman reports no caregiver services received. No receipt or care log produced. The sound in the room changed. It wasn't silence exactly. It was attention. Pages stopped moving. Leah leaned forward. My mother had one hand over her mouth. Ms. Larkin continued. June 2nd. ATM withdrawal, $800. Card ending 4419. Mrs. Coleman was at a primary care appointment from 10:30 to 12:15, transported by Theo Coleman. No evidence funds were used for Mrs. Coleman. Diane turned her head a fraction, not all the way toward me. Just enough that I knew she had heard my name. July 14th. Refinance closing. Cash proceeds deposited July 16th, $52,384.17. Mrs. Coleman denies authorizing refinance. Mrs. Miller signed as attorney-in-fact. No written care plan, repair estimate, or authorization produced. Diane's face had changed color. The confident flush was gone. She looked older, but not in a way that made me pity her. More like the person she pretended to be had stepped back, and the person doing the math was left sitting there. July 18th. Cashier's check, $10,000. Deposited to Diane and Paul Miller joint account. Mrs. Miller states reimbursement for prior advances. No prior advance ledger produced. Mark exhaled beside me. July 22nd. Payment, $8,500. To credit card ending 1182. Records show card in Mrs. Miller's name. Mrs. Miller states mother's expenses were charged to card. Statements produced do not substantiate claimed amount. Diane whispered, "This is ridiculous." The judge looked at her. She stopped. Ms. Larkin went on. Date after date, amount after amount. Not emotional, not angry. That made it worse for Diane. Anger gives you something to fight. Numbers just stand there. September 9th. Reimbursement, $1,650. Memo, caregiver transport and supplies. Same date as cardiology appointment. Mrs. Coleman reports only Walgreens purchase for mints using Mrs. Coleman's own card. No supply receipts produced. A tiny sound came from Leah. Almost a gasp, but held back. Diane looked at her daughter then. That was the first time she seemed afraid. Not of the judge. Not of repayment. of being seen by someone whose loyalty she had counted as property. Ms. Larkin reached November. November 21st. Reimbursement $1,200. Caregiver services. Agency invoice shows Patrice Howard provided morning care from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Dental office payroll records show Mrs. Miller worked 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. No evening care log produced. Diane's attorney stood. Your Honor, we object to the implication that informal care must be logged minute by minute. The judge said, the objection is noted. The issue is not informality. The issue is money taken from the principal's account. Continue. Continue. That word hit like a door locking. Ms. Larkin finished the log with the emotional labor line. She handled it professionally, which almost made it funnier. Mrs. Miller claims $9,600 for emotional labor and administrative burden. I found no written agreement authorizing compensation, no contemporaneous time records supporting the amount, and no court approval. I therefore excluded it as unsupported. Grandma closed her eyes for 1 second. I could tell she was fighting a comment with everything she had. Then Paula asked one final set of questions. Ms. Larkin, in your opinion, did the records maintained by Mrs. Coleman and scanned by Theo Coleman assist your review? Yes. How? They provided contemporaneous monthly statements, preserved before this dispute escalated. They also provided Mrs. Coleman's handwritten questions tied to specific transactions. That helped distinguish recent accusations from concerns documented at the time of the transactions. Without those scans, would your review have been harder? Substantially. Paula nodded. Thank you. That was the understanding moment. Not the ruling. Not the repayment order. That was when Diane finally looked back at me. Her face was not angry anymore. It was stunned. She looked at the binder on my lap, then at Grandma, then at Ms. Larkin's gray binder, and I watched the connection happen. She had thought the scans were a hobby. She had thought I was playing office. She had thought every monthly statement vanished into a drawer after she explained it away. She had thought Grandma's questions were old lady confusion. She had thought calling me greedy would contaminate the evidence before anyone read it. But the scans had dates. The notes had dates. The files had names. The statements had bank logos. The refinance had a recording number. The neighbor had a window facing the driveway. The agency had invoices. The court had a neutral fiduciary. And Diane had given us the line that explained exactly why she never saw it coming. You're a kid playing accountant. I didn't say it. I wanted to. I won't pretend I didn't. The words were right there behind my teeth. But Grandma's advice held. Angry in your shoes, not your mouth. So I said nothing. The judge did the talking. He found that Diane had failed to provide an adequate accounting for substantial transactions conducted under the power of attorney. He found that the refinance raised serious concerns regarding benefit to Grandma and breach of fiduciary duty. He continued the suspension of Diane's authority, confirmed the revocation, ordered Diane to repay an initial surcharge amount based on unsupported transactions, and set a further review for remaining disputed sums and fees. He ordered that no further loans or encumbrances could be placed on Grandma's home without court approval. He authorized Ms. Larkin to continue as neutral fiduciary for financial oversight, with Grandma's consent, and he referred the matter to the appropriate agency for review of potential elder financial abuse. The initial repayment number was $38,700, due on a schedule secured by a lien against Diane's share of any future estate distribution if unpaid sooner. Additional amounts could follow after further tracing. Diane made a small sound when the judge said lien, not a sob, not a word. A small, involuntary breath, like someone had opened a bill she thought would never arrive. Leah started crying then, quietly. Diane turned as if to comfort her, but Leah leaned away. It was barely visible. I saw it because, again, I was watching too closely. Grandma sat very still. Her hands were folded over her purse. The pearl earrings caught the light when she turned her head toward Diane. Diane did not look back. When court ended, people stood in that awkward way they do after something irreversible has happened in a room designed for routine. Chairs scraped, papers went into folders. Attorneys spoke softly. The judge left through his door. Diane walked into the hallway first. Mr. Feld followed. Leah stayed behind for a few seconds, then came over to Grandma. "Grandma?" she said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." Grandma touched her cheek. "Don't let being sorry be the last useful thing you do." Leah nodded, crying harder. My mother hugged me in the hallway. She had hugged me 1,000 times in my life, but this one felt different. Smaller. Ashamed. "I should have listened," she said. I didn't know what to say. I could have said yes. I could have said it's okay. Neither felt true. So I said, "I know." Mark shook my hand, which was absurd because he was my uncle, then pulled me into a hug that almost cracked my ribs. Grandma waited until everyone had finished being emotional. Then she looked at me. "Take me home," she said. "I want my own tea. Court tea is terrible." On the drive back, she watched the streets pass. Spring had not quite arrived, but the snow piles were dirty and shrinking. At a red light, she said, "I keep thinking I should feel better." "Do you?" "No." "Me neither." She nodded. "Good. Then we're not broken." The aftermath was not clean. Diane did not go to jail, at least not during the part of the story I can tell. The agency review took time. The repayment schedule became its own fight. Her attorney negotiated. Paula pushed back. Ms. Larkin kept tracing. Some funds were recovered quickly because Diane and Paul took out a loan against their own house. Some were credited against amounts Diane might have inherited later, which was ironic enough that Grandma allowed herself one satisfied eyebrow raise. The family rupture stayed. Diane stopped coming to holidays. Then she tried to host a separate Easter, and almost nobody went because by then the documents had done what documents do when people finally read them. They made pretending expensive. Leah visited Grandma with her baby and sat on the floor by the recliner like a penitent. Ryan apologized by text, which Grandma accepted by making him clean the gutters. My mother became more present, though guilt made her hover until Grandma told her, "Elaine, I survived childbirth 3 times. I can choose my own soup." Mark took over the practical bill routine with a system Paula helped set up. Monthly statements went to Grandma, Mark, and Ms. Larkin. Any reimbursement required a receipt and Grandma's written approval while she had capacity. The refinance stayed under review, and the house could not be touched without court permission. Grandma said it felt humiliating to need oversight until Ms. Larkin told her oversight was not punishment. It was a lock on a door someone had already opened. As for me, I kept scanning. Not because I wanted to live in suspicion forever. Because Grandma still wanted copies. The folder became less dramatic over time. Electric bill, pharmacy receipt, property tax, bank statement, agency invoice. Sometimes Grandma would tap the laptop and say, "Put that in the vault, Mr. Accountant," and I would roll my eyes because she enjoyed the joke too much. One afternoon in May, we found the old cigar box Grandpa used for receipts. It was in the garage on a shelf behind paint cans that had turned into geology. Inside were faded slips from hardware stores, appliance manuals, and a receipt for the maple tree from 1984. Grandma held that one for a long time. "He paid $22 for that tree," she said. "It has probably cost more than that in gutter cleaning." Most living things do. She put the receipt back and handed me the box. "Use this for the copies you print. Your grandfather would enjoy being right." So I did. The most important scans lived in digital folders, backed up twice, but the printed summaries went into Grandpa's cigar box. It sat on Grandma's bookshelf under a framed photo of him holding a fish that was not as big as he claimed. Months later, Diane sent Grandma a letter. Not an apology. A letter. There is a difference. It said she had been overwhelmed, that no one understood the pressure she was under, that mistakes were made, that she hoped someday the family could heal. Grandma read it once, folded it, and handed it to me. "Scan it," she said. I did. Then she put the original in the cigar box. The last time I saw Diane in person was outside the courthouse after a later review hearing. She looked thinner. Her hair was still perfect. She was standing by the vending machines with Leah, speaking in a low voice. When she saw me, she stopped. For a second I thought she might say something. Maybe accuse me. Maybe apologize. Maybe repeat the line one more time because some people would rather live inside a losing sentence than admit it lost. Instead, she looked at the folder in my hand and then looked away. That was enough. Because the point was never to make Diane suffer in some dramatic way. It was to make the truth heavier than her version. For months, her power had been narrative. She was the responsible eldest. I was the naive grandson. Grandma was confused. Questions were attacks. Missing money was caregiving. A loan against a paid-off house was planning. The records changed the weight of every sentence. A reimbursement without a receipt became a question. A question with a date became a pattern. A pattern beside a refinance became a breach. A breach in front of a judge became an order, and an order became a locked door between Diane and Grandma's money. Grandma lived in her house after that. Not forever. Nobody gets forever. But she lived there on her terms. She sat under the maple tree in summer while Mark pretended the patio chair didn't wobble. She watched Leah's baby learn to walk across the living room carpet. She complained about low-sodium soup with the energy of a woman personally betrayed by broth. She kept her bank statements in a folder labeled Theo's homework because she thought she was hilarious. And every month, when the mail came, she would slide the statement across the kitchen table. "Keep an eye on things," she'd say. So I did. If you've ever been the person in your family holding the uncomfortable proof, you know it doesn't feel heroic. It feels lonely, then boring, then terrifying, then lonely again. You second-guess yourself. You wonder if peace is worth more than accuracy. You learn that some people will call you divisive because you refuse to help them keep a secret. But I also learned this. Paper is patient. Dates are patient. Bank lines do not care who hosted Thanksgiving. Scans do not care who cries first. And sometimes the person everyone dismisses as a kid playing accountant is the only one who kept the receipt.